William, your videographer from Two Hats Publishing. Welcome to the College of Complexes, being held at Barbeck's Restaurant at 8949 Garland Road, Dallas, Texas. Gently embracing the east side of White Rock Lake. When I entered, I was greeted like coming home to Grandma's house, warm and friendly. When visiting the Barbeck's Restaurant, tell them you want your reservations for the next College of Complex class.
Well, welcome to the College of Complexes. This is our 250th meeting since we started in 2009, February. We put a speaker on every week, a different subject. We require our speaker to take a position on an issue or express a point of view. They have to be for or against something. We don't care what it is. We give them an hour to make a presentation. If they go over an hour, we cut them off. If anybody interrupts the speaker, remind the interrupter we only listen to one fool at a time. Yeah, that's it. And then we have questions and answers, not speeches. And we have remarks, rebuttals. Everybody in this audience that wants to gets 5 minutes at the podium to respond to the speaker said for or against. Our speaker gets the last word, gets a comment and close the meeting. But before we start our meeting, is there anyone that has any announcements? Now's the time to make announcements. Any announcements? You have announcements you want to make? No? Susie, you got announcements you want to make? No? No announcements. I can't believe this. We always have announcements. All right. Well, anyway. You got an announcement you want to make? Come on up here.
Volunteer, do it. Don't volunteer somebody if you know.
You want to make your announcement? Come on up here. Announcement time.
Anybody who likes JFK conspiracy, we're in Ground Zero. On the weekend of his death, every year the JFK Lancers is the name of this organization. They meet at the Adolphus Hotel, and we're going to be in the hallway, Joe and I and Bruce, and maybe. And when is it exactly? It's on Friday and it's Sunday? 21st and 22nd, Friday and Saturday. I did say that. It's on record. Adolphus Hotel. And on Friday, it starts at 4, and then Saturday, it's all day, 8 to 8. So the announcement is made.
Okay, any other announcements? That's it, I guess. All right. You have any announcements you want to make? No? All right. Next, I'm looking. I don't see anybody new. Anybody see new? Any new people, let me know. Anyway, if you're not on the email list, let me know. We'll make sure you get a copy of what's going on. Anyway, next week is, we're going to have Robert Petrie. He's going to talk about, are we going to allow continued economic embargo of our inner cities? That's on your itinerary that I handed out. I don't want to read it all again. On December 13th, Stephen Butler, he was here before. He's a historian and author. He's going to discuss why the Republican Party is bad for both America and the world, so that'll be interesting. That's 2 weeks from now. No, that's December 13th. On December 6th, it's not on here, we'll have Karen McGovern. I'm still waiting for her to send me a blurb on what she's going to talk about, but Catherine McGovern, not Karen. Catherine McGovern. What's that, Susan? Yeah, Karen? No, Catherine. Catherine's her name. Catherine, I remember that. Anyway, she'll be our speaker December 6th. December 13th, why the Republicans bad for both America and the world. Thanksgiving weekend, we won't have a meeting because it being Thanksgiving weekend. Same with Christmas. 2 weeks at Christmas, we won't have meetings due to Christmas. Got to take care of that. So nobody will show up anyway. So we better not have one. Anyway, that's tonight. Jim Love's our speaker. He's going to talk about, are we really in a state of decline? He's worked as an engineer and educator with publications in both fields. He holds a BS and MS in physics from the University of Texas. He's going to discuss how there is something more fundamental than liberalism versus conservatism, that emphasis on our current situation, which is decline. He will examine the mechanism of decline, and second, will illustrate how this mechanism applies to the recent midterm elections. Jim will conclude that the basic part of our best way forward is to fully understand why we are where we are now. So without further ado, please give a very, very warm welcome to Jim Love.
Test, 1, 2, can you hear me? Thank you for coming one more time. I very much appreciate it. I know there's plenty of other things you could be doing. All right, thank you. Thank you very much. All right, I'm going to make the case for decline, but I want to remind people that I'm not making a case for hopelessness. There's a difference between hopelessness and being hopeful. I'm still hopeful, but I still think we're in decline. I'm going to make the case for a prime mover, which stands behind the prime movers of conservatism and liberalism. And I'm going to acknowledge a debt to George Orwell, who I believe is not only a great writer, but a great political scientist as well. But anyways, and this divides up into two parts. Part one has to do in general with describing decline, what it is and how it happened. And in part two, once I've come up with a model for how it happened, I'm going to explain how I think it applies to what happened in the most recent midterms. Okay, so here's part one. Mature societies often decline because the ruling class refuses to give up an established hold on wealth and power. And that's been true across time and across all sorts of political systems for centuries. Rome comes to mind, as does the aristocracy prior to the French Revolution. Orwell warned us about it both in 1984 and Animal Farm. Some pigs were more equal than others. And the process of decline is accelerated as power and wealth is more and more concentrated. To the extent that democratic institutions can prevent the accumulation of wealth and power, the process is slowed or even reversed. And when I say that, I think of the first 100 days of FDR's New Deal, where quite a few things got reversed. However, democratic institutions must be functional and not a front for controlling interests behind the scenes for this to happen. Once power and privilege has been concentrated, however, the beneficiaries take over and they become reactionary to any and all initiatives that would threaten their privilege. In case you're wondering, here's what I mean by decline. It means that there is a steadily growing lack of support for the system by the majority. It takes many forms, but it often includes an unwillingness to fight in foreign wars. That's shared by elites who find legal ways out, and even some of the underclass who spout slogans like, "Hell no, we won't go." It also involves giving up on voting. Think of the turnout in this recent midterm. It involves the corrupting ability to purchase anything, laws, policies, lawmakers, and even justice. And above all, it involves a pervasive cynicism and disbelief in the system and its leaders, regardless of party affiliation. And so everything falls apart, as eerily symbolized by our decaying infrastructure. And all of this by now should sound very familiar. 3/4 of the people in this country think we're on the wrong track. That sounds an awful lot to me like disbelief in the system, apart from whether or not you're Republican or Democrat. So, we are in decline, in my opinion, contrary to what our leadership tells us, and it's my purpose here to describe how it happened along with its chief features. So, I'm going to start with the most noticeable chief feature, which are big lies. Big lies are told on both sides of the political divide, But I must admit that the GOP has elevated lying into an art form. The liberal media being a standby that's used all the time by the GOP. Every time something is told that the GOP doesn't like, well, that's just the liberal media lying as usual, right? Here's another one of the big lies that is coming from the right. The current administration represents an attempt to buy votes from illegals and non-producers, thereby making the United States into a socialistic freeloaders utopia. And a big lie coming from the left is that elected Democratic officials are entirely on the side of we the people. I refute the first claim by noting that Obama most closely resembles an Eisenhower Republican. He is neither Trotsky nor Lenin. The left wing of his party, by the way, will tell you that that is exactly his problem, but that's another story. Obama is moderate in a way that is unfortunately no longer welcome within the Republican Party. His administration saved the banks first in 2008. He did not push for too small to matter if they failed, much less nationalizing them. He put Bernanke and Geithner, both Wall Street insiders, in charge of respectively the Fed and the Treasury. He tried and failed to find compromise with the GOP. And this administration has deported a record number of illegal immigrants. And even though he's likely overreached his executive authority, it is not because of any dictatorial ambitions, but because he is utterly frustrated because so many of his initiatives have been blocked by the radical right in the House. This is hardly the portrait of a communist. On the left, we have claims that people and not money is what matters. Yet, when it came to passage of the Affordable Care Act, when there were Democratic supermajorities in both houses, the bill was long bottled up in Democratic-controlled committees and could not emerge for a vote until the special interests had made their changes to the proposed legislation. Common sense pointed to a swift up and down vote on a single payer system where cost would be lowest and efficiencies highest. But in the bought and paid for government that is Washington, D.C., the special interests had their way. So the committees charged with designing a horse came up with the proverbial camel. And the day the Affordable Care Act passed, which act is liked only by those who could not otherwise afford insurance, every single healthcare stock on the stock exchanges gapped up. It was, therefore, a victory for the special interests and a heartache that Obama has ever since had to embrace. The telltale line that indicates who really won is the oft-repeated phrase, "It's not a perfect bill," which most agree is a considerable understatement. Okay, so those are just examples of some of the big lies that you're hearing on both sides of the divide. Now, I want to get at what happened, how we've reached this state of affairs, okay, of decline. But in order to do that, we have to take a long view. And that view extends over the length of my adult lifetime. We start with the New Deal, which was a good deal, in my opinion, that has been systematically dismantled. You have to ask yourself, why? Here's why. Because those who had been privileged prior to the time of the Great Depression lost their privilege under the New Deal. They did not like progressive taxes. They did not like restriction of banking and business activity, and they certainly did not like the empowerment of unions. So, since the 40s, taxes have been lowered or evaded by means of loopholes. Think of today's inversions, or Enron paying no taxes for 3 of the last 5 years it was in business. Glass-Steagall was gutted, and 3 bubbles popped in the aftermath. Taxpayers, of course, picked up the tab. Jobs were shipped overseas, and broken unions were powerless to do a damn thing about it. A private sector propaganda machine was set up, and you could think Fox, and if you like, you could think MSNBC. to tell people what to think, reminding them again and again that either you've never had it so good, or that the compromise with the opposition was to, when the opposition was in power, was to betray everything that was good in America. And of course, gerrymandering helped a lot, as it ensured that with it, elected officials would now usually be preaching to a down-home choir. And so now we have 90%, and that's probably a minimum, of all seats in the House that are safe. The truly depressing bottom line is this. A massive power shift was made possible and is maintained by a wealth and income gap that has been growing over the last few decades and as yet shows no signs of shrinking, even though it is generally acknowledged that the gap exists on both sides. That and the Supreme Court decision that money equals speech, which is truly Orwellian in its violence done to both language and logic, is now busy dismantling democracy itself. And it should come as no surprise that what the privileged have bought and paid for will stay bought and paid for if they have anything to say about it, which of course they most certainly do. So, forget about liberalism and conservatism. Those, in large part, are just cover stories. It's more fundamental than that, as I've just described. There is a prime mover behind the prime mover. And the politicians are merely hired hands who find themselves in the middle, trying to explain to you, okay, that you've never had it so good when it really isn't that way. Quite frankly, I have no answers on how to fix this, as history suggests that reform from the top is rare. If it comes at all, it's from the bottom and usually involves lots of fire and friction. Nevertheless, I can point to something hopeful, and it's this. You can't solve a problem until you know what the problem actually is. Now you know what I think, what I know to be the problem. And believe it or not, I would like to be proven wrong, as it's getting pretty late in the game, at least in my opinion. So you can help me out in the commentary and make me feel better, believe it or not, by demolishing my arguments. And I'm waiting on you, Ray. All right, so now, that's in general how we've got into decline, in my view. But now what I want to talk about is, how does this view fit with the outcome of the recent midterms? I think it fits quite well, and I want to tell you why. First, I assume that both parties are corrupted, differing only in degree. The Democrats, I do believe, are less corrupted than the GOP, but they have their big donors too, aiming to buy influence, which is always for sale at the right price, as evidenced by the struggle to pass the Affordable Care Act. Why couldn't that thing just have been voted out of committee? Boom, up and down vote, and that's it. It's because too many people were bought. Rare independents like Bernie Sanders are much more likely to be even less corrupted, coming from small states and not needing the bucks to campaign. Besides, with such a small base, they are in no position to deliver much of anything other than blasts of progressive rhetoric. So, reasons of special interests, let them talk. That can affect us. What's at stake now, though, is total control of the government, and naturally the GOP wants the presidency in addition to both houses. Always keep in mind that what the prime movers fear most is a revival of the New Deal and its policies, the three big things I talked about. So all efforts will be exerted on both sides to win that prize, but both sides have complications between now and 2016. The GOP can easily let this latest big win go to their head, interpreting it as a mandate to undo everything the Obama administration has done. Affordable Care Act repealed, hearings on the IRS, hearings on Benghazi, impeachment proceedings, you name it. Ted Cruz doesn't want to run a government, He wants to run an inquisition and will be disappointed if Obama is not burned at the stake. For the good of the GOP, not to mention the country, what remains of the Republican moderates needs to take their party back and save it from itself. If they manage to do so, I might even consider voting for a Republican in time to come. But until that happens, forget about it. Both Mitch McConnell and Boehner need to find their backbones, say no to the extremists, and think of the country first. I'm not holding my breath. Oddly enough, if they do, they just might win by proving to us that they can govern rather than obstruct. But I don't know, but I can imagine what the book in Las Vegas would be on that. Now, as for the Democrats, don't be disheartened. The latest setback is just a battle, and the war goes on, and the world will turn. 2 years is not very long, and the election cycle is much shorter than that for a presidential race. And if a civil war breaks out within the GOP, it will surprise few, which could open up the road for not just the presidency, but both houses as well. Keep in mind that I'm old enough to remember the Goldwater debacle and how everybody was saying that the Republican Party was now extinct, right? 20 years later, Reagan was elected. So the world will turn. Of course, another big lie that's out there now is that Obama lost because he kept trying to bring back big government, but the people rejected it. With all due respect, I say no. And this is something I'd like you to remember. Look at it this way. Coaches get fired because they don't win. Obama got hired, which is elected in the first place, because the American people thought we needed a geek to take on the Great Recession and fix the economy so they could get back to normal. And yes, Bush's unpopularity because of the Iraq War helped too, but guess what? The economy, after 6 long years, is better for investors, but still not so hot for working people, that is, people like you and me. The wealth and income gap is yet growing, which definitely supports my claim that the right wing is winning the long war. Wages are yet flat, have been nearly so for a decade, and record numbers of folks are working temp jobs. So even though it's not all his fault, and even though there's plenty of obstruction by the GOP House, lots of filibustering by GOP senators, and even though he was dealt a series of lousy hands, and even though it may even be unfair, and even though there may be a new normal, the geeky professor did not get it done. And Joe Sixpack, frustrated with Washington and its inability to get the things done he most desperately wanted done, decided to give the GOP a shot. Why not? After 6 years, you get tired of waiting on the hope and change. Think on it. In 6 states, referendums on the minimum wage increases passed. Those were Democratic initiatives. 3 were red states. Why couldn't Obama get that done and more on a national level? Answers will vary, but I'm of the opinion that in Washington especially, no good deed will go unpunished. Actually, it's even worse. No attempt at a good deed will go unpunished. And here we are, and here we and the Republic stand, paralyzed and in decline. That's it. Questions?
Hello, Jim. My question is, how important do you think election fraud was in this recent election?
I'm no expert. It depends on I get the thing I would say is that it matters when the margins are thin, and it's probably negligible when the margins are not thin. Now, if you think back, if you ask Al Gore, and you think back to Florida, back at Bush's election, then I think election fraud is very important. Then the margins were very thin, and then being able to get in there, okay, and to do something to either suppress the votes or enhance the people that would normally vote for you, okay, then it really matters. To the extent that that's being done, I don't know for sure. I do know this. Kennedy never would have been president if it hadn't been for all the Civil War veterans in Cook County that Mayor Daley managed to get the vote for him. I know that for sure. That's what I'm being facetious, but you know what I mean. Dead people were voting in Illinois, right? And Tom knows what I'm talking about. Okay. I mean, Daley. There's been vote fraud on both sides, you know, but there has to be the opportunity, right? And here in Texas, of course, they refer to Johnson as landslide Lyndon, right? And the reason they did that is because there were these magic ballots that were suddenly discovered in Uvalde County, right, that put him over the top. So if you're asking me, can voter fraud be a factor, the answer is hell yes, it can be, right? But it depends on small margins.
Yes, so for the purposes of this talk, this election, we're assuming that pretty much the vote has been declared to us. You're assuming it's accurate overall.
I would think that, I would say that there was a Republican wave, and I think that whatever voter fraud was taking place was, even if there was, and you could fix it, I don't think it would change anything. That would be my view. I mean, I'm perfectly willing to acknowledge that there was a Republican wave. I'm not perfectly willing to say that it was justified. I would say that the Republicans have been very successful in politicking, okay, but they have no agenda, and I doubt very seriously, okay, that they will have an agenda other than big fights amongst themselves as to who gets to run for president. How's that for cynicism?
If there's nobody else, I got another question. All right. Did you get a chance to look at that China video I had forwarded to you?
I've got it, but I haven't looked at it,
Okay.
but I will.
Okay.
No questions? Everybody totally agrees, right? No, Jim doesn't. Jim doesn't.
Well, I think I have two questions at the moment. One is, you mentioned right at the very end of your presentation that several states had approved raising their minimum wage, which they did and was probably appropriate. What's your view about minimum wage and how we have set one up on a national basis, but then we don't update it on a real frequent routine basis?
Well, I'm familiar with the argument that says that, you know, it's a push-pull type thing. I mean, on the one hand, the people that do get the minimum wage increase benefit from it, you know, but on the other hand, I'm perfectly willing to acknowledge that it's a deterrent for employers, okay, because now they have to pay more and it suppresses hiring. Okay, I understand those arguments. As to which is the greater of the two, I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not that much of an expert on it. I will say this, though, within the larger context, okay, of the growth in the wealth and income gap, it's probably a small thing that can be done and should be done if it turns out that it does improve things on a net basis. I'm of the opinion I'm segueing now, and stop me if you don't like it. I'm of the opinion that this wealth gap and income gap is very serious. It's very serious, and it's probably one of our main problems, and it's a main problem because of the fact that it puts people who are in a very powerful position in a position to do exactly what they've done, which is buy the government. And hire people like Rush Limbaugh and pay them $200 million a year to tell people what to think, and finance right-wing candidates in primaries, which are now more important than the general election, okay, to get people in, okay, who will gerrymander things, okay, so the status quo remains. Now, none of this could be done if it wasn't for the fact these people had so much money that they didn't know what to do with it. Well, they have figured out what to do with it. And what they're doing with it is dismantling democracy. Because they think that an oligarchy is just fine. They are the prime movers. If you want to know who the prime movers are, they're the people who have got so much money that they can afford to do this and who are never held accountable for what happens in government. Which is why I mentioned earlier that the people in government, okay, can't really ultimately be held responsible because they're just hired hands.
Lackeys.
Yes. And I make no distinction between Democrats or Republicans, okay? The problem is endemic on both sides.
Second question.
Yes, sir.
Explain to us what you see in your perception as the difference over the past 6 years in the Republican national legislators from the Democratic legislators in the 8 years of Bush's administration.
You mean both parties or just one party? Over
In other words,
two administrations.
Two administrations. You had, for first 6 years of Bush's administration, the Republicans controlled the Congress. The last 2 years, the Democrats controlled the Congress. Now, the new president's in, Democratic Party controlled the Congress for 6 years. For 2 years, and then
yes.
For the next 4 years, they controlled half the Congress, which blocked it up and made it ineffective. Now, in the last 2 years of his legislation, it'll be identical to the last 2 years of Bush's, in that he's in his office with his party and the opposite party controls the Congress.
I see what you mean. You're saying that he's facing the same problem that two houses that are controlled by the opposite party.
Yeah, do you think the Democrats or the Republicans are more resistive to the policies that the president wants to use to administer the country? That's basically my question.
You mean this time around with Obama?
Yes.
I hate to be even more cynical, but they haven't gotten along and they hate each other's guts, okay, over 6 years, right? And I heard a lot of happy talk on day one, and day two, everything went sour, right? My view is that the Republicans will be busy fighting amongst themselves as to whether or not they're going to, who's going to run for president will be a big priority. And then the other issue will be is how much do we want to punish and humiliate Obama. The other more moderate section, what's left within the Republicans, will say, well, wait a minute, this could damage us in the presidential race, but then again, they may not care. But I do not, my vision of what's going to happen over the next few years is that you'll see more gridlock, you'll see more deadlock, you'll see more acrimony. But I think the economy will continue to improve, and I think that Wall Street will love it. And the reason they'll love it is they know what to expect. Nothing. That's what I think. And if I were to advise, I mean, who the hell am I? But if I were to advise Obama, I would say concentrate in foreign policy, because you're not going to get any cooperation whatsoever from the right wing. None. That would be my advice. Susie.
Thanks, Jim. I happened to catch an interview with President Obama on, I guess it was the 60th anniversary of Face the Nation. And one of the things that he suggested is that, you know, the Republicans in both houses have had an opportunity to pass immigration reform. And now they're quite up in arms about the fact that he would potentially make an executive order determining something about immigration. And the interesting thing that he mentioned was that once Congress acts, his executive order goes away. So he's simply using this as sort of a stick to get them to do something on immigration. I guess my reason for bringing that up is you mentioned immigration policy in your speech, and I was wondering, what do you think could fix that? I mean, are we talking about a Reagan-esque amnesty or some other solution?
Well, I mean, you probably got me out of my depth and understand. I pretty much agree that Obama is saying, well, if you don't do something, I will. You know, and I think the big issue is, and there's precedent for presidents get to decide who gets in and who gets kicked out. There's no question about that constitutionally, at least according to the reading that I've done. The issue is the size, the magnitude, okay, of the people who are either going to be allowed to stay or they're going to be kicked out. I mean, and he does have an authority to do a certain number. The only thing that I would disagree with him on is when he made the announcement, rather than saying, well, if you don't, I will, and I'm going to act within the week. I guess it was 2 weeks. I would have liked to have seen him give them some window of time so he could always say that I gave you an opportunity over and above all this foot dragging that you did prior to this. But I also understand why he didn't do it, because the more time you give them, the more clever ways they can think of, okay, of thwarting what you're trying to do, okay, like attaching, okay, an agreement on his part not to do anything unilaterally as far as amnesty is concerned to a spending bill. All right, so in some ways, I'm really of two minds of it. I mean, it would have been nice if he could have given them a window. In fact, Biden was making noises along those lines, but then Obama, in the meeting that they had, gave him an ugly look, and he shut up.
So another question, sort of related to that, is, obviously it was successful for the Republicans who ran on immigration here in Texas to continue winning on that, because that was such a huge issue that came up. You know, what do you have to say to the fact that the Republicans have been in power in Texas for 20 years and they have done very little about immigration policy here for Texas? Is there a reason that suddenly the last
they've been successful in blaming everything bad on Obama?
Well, not just Obama. I mean, we're talking 20 years of history where they've had their
They forget about
to do whatever they thought.
They forget
was
about the
necessary.
preceding years, right? It all happened during Obama's term, and it doesn't make sense and it's not logical, but that's the way it is.
And do you think that had a huge impact on this past election's results?
Well, like I say, I mean, the Republicans, the right wing, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, are very good at the big lie. And the big lie, of course, is that everything that's bad is Obama's fault. That's pretty much it's a knee-jerk reaction. You know, and to the extent that you can get that out and you can sell it and people will support it, okay, whether or not it's true or not, I mean, it's the big lie works. Even if there's a retraction later on, the damage is already done and people have acted on it. That's why big lies just before an election are so effective, right? By the time the word gets out and gets back, okay, that it was a lie, it's too late because people have voted and they acted on the lie.
Very true.
Yeah.
Okay.
You mentioned something about 90% of the House seats are safe, which is to say, I'm thinking that since I think there's 45 state houses, either the governor or the Congress of the different states, 45 out of 50 are now controlled by the Republican Party. How do we overcome this 90% gerrymandered districts throughout the country?
Well, like I said, I don't have a lot of answers, and it's not easy. Now, I do know that 5 states are going ahead now, and they're appointing supposedly nonpartisan commissions, okay, to redraw the lines.
5 states?
Yeah, 5 states are doing it. California's among them.
What are the other 4?
I don't know. I can't remember right now.
Okay.
Now, the Supreme Court is not helpful either. And the Supreme Court is not helpful because the Supreme Court has ruled that gerrymandering for purposes of racial discrimination is illegal, which is good as far as it goes. But the Supreme Court has also said that gerrymandering for purposes of partisan purposes is just fine. Now, I maintain up one side and down the other. The Supreme Court, to the extent that they support idiotic decisions like this, are busy helping dismantle democracy. Because the primaries are the only election that matters in all of these gerrymandered districts. Say it again? Race. But, you know, the deal is that, well, in right-wing gerrymandered districts, the way it works is that the big money, that is to say that the movers and shakers, you know, the prime movers, they're saying, well, gee, here's my shopping list of what I want done and what I want you to back. And if you'll do it, fine. And if you don't, I'll find another candidate and I'll use my money. And because the people who are active in primaries, okay, are rabid, okay? They will find a way to turn out the vote to get you out of there, okay, so that they get their agenda going forward. And then, of course, the general election, because it's gerrymandered, it means nothing. So we have a system that's designed, okay, to defeat democracy because the rule of the majority doesn't matter anymore. A willful minority in a gerrymandered district gets to block anything they damn well please. They send their people to Washington and they got their marching orders and they do what they're instructed to do. And the Supreme Court participates in it. Supreme Court says, oh, we want more money in politics because more money is speech. How's that for Orwellian distortion? Money is not speech. Money's money. But what do I know?
Or the bigger question is, what do we do about it?
Well, the beginning is, the only thing I can offer you tonight is understanding the problem. I mean, that's the first step. You got to understand the problem. And the problem is that a democracy is being dismantled. Again, it's being dismantled by oligarchs, and people with a lot of money, a lot of power, a lot of influence, who find it inconvenient to pay taxes. But they find it very convenient to control a bought and paid for Congress. And they don't particularly worry about whether or not they're taking this country over the cliff or not, you know? I mean, things are running just fine as far as they're concerned. Apart from the fact that 3/4 of the people in this country think we're going in the wrong direction, apart from the fact that wages, okay, for middle-class people had been held flat for at least 10 years and probably 20. Yes, sir, Albert.
From what I have read in years past, I forget the exact details, but Eisenhower's administration deported 10 million illegal aliens. Another president, 12 million, I think it was, and another 13 million. That's like 35 million people going back 50, 75, 80 years ago. And given the fact that they came from cultures that generally have large amounts of children in their families, what would be the shape of this country at this point with all of those people included in the infrastructure that is collapsing because it can't support itself?
Well, if you're saying that it's a tough question as to decide who stays and who goes, I certainly agree with you. I mean, I'm not smart enough to figure that one out. I mean, I do know that the population of illegals in this country equals roughly the size of the state of Ohio. I mean, and that's a lot of people. Now, what you're going to do about them, I mean, it's a humanitarian issue, but it's also an issue having to do with, are our borders secure? I mean, I can agree with the Republicans to the extent we should have secure borders and we should control who comes across. I don't think there's any question about that, but what are you going to do about that population of Ohio that's sitting here, especially if their kids have been born and they're now Americans? It's not an easy question to answer. I have no answer.
Well, what about the well-educated Europeans who have to wait 2 and 3 years if they apply for citizenship or immigration? Where's the fairness here?
Well, that's just another difficulty. I mean, you're talking about people who've got something to offer and who can add to the GDP. Okay, they can create jobs, okay, and they can become entrepreneurs, they can do startups, okay, and they would probably be an asset, right? And what you're telling me is that it's more complicated, and I agree. But the big problem is the president does have constitutional authority to decide who stays and goes. But when you get up to the sort of numbers that you're talking about, then it starts to become very difficult politically, okay? And of course, the GOP knows that. The GOP needs to do more to gain support among Latinos, right? And, the president's making it tough on them. Yes, I mean, he's putting a gun to their head. He's saying, I'm going to give you a choice between two things, neither of which you're going to particularly like. Now, from my point of view, and it's nasty. I admit, it's nasty. From my point of view, he's way late in doing that sort of thing. I mean, he's shown himself, I thought, in the beginning of his administration, to be out of reckoning in that he thought that the Republicans really wanted to work with him, which I think was a huge mistake. By the end of the first year, it should have been obvious these people had no intention whatsoever of working with him. Their idea was to destroy his presidency and to take back power and to maintain a status quo that was highly advantageous to you-know-who. I've been disappointed in Obama, quite frankly, because of the fact that he didn't get down in the gutter and start playing hardball politics earlier. Now, whether or not this immigration issue is the place to do it, I'm not so sure. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Maybe it's too big and maybe you shouldn't be doing it. But the principle of using coercion, yeah. I mean, I think he should have gotten onto that a long time ago. Yeah.
While we're on the subject related to that, what do you think about all the government things like the ballot and the bank? Everything, everywhere you go is in Spanish. Like your water bill, the ballot. You had two ballots. You had one side was English, the other side was Spanish.
Well, the controversy I think you're speaking of is nativist versus, my ancestors, of course, wanted to become Americans, so That's why I can't speak Polish. Okay? I mean,
I speak Spanish, by the way.
And again, in my grandmother, my father's side, could actually speak Gaelic. But I don't know. I haven't really thought that through. There's arguments on both sides.
I just think it relates to your topic about the country just being unraveled on purpose.
Well, wedge politics is played on both sides, and of course, Obama has found a wedge now that he's using against the
It's not
Republicans.
politics, that's bureaucratic decisions, you know.
well.
Yeah, it is politics. They get the orders from somewhere.
But
You know, it's just in my lifetime. It seems kind of quick. You know, I came here.
well, but my view is this: is I would prefer that people thought of themselves, apart from whatever the language is they thought of themselves as Americans first, and that we're all in the same boat together. And politicians, my ideal politician would be. It's sad that. John's not here. My ideal politician would be along the lines of Winston Churchill. He'd stand up, he'd say, I have nothing to offer but blood, sweat, and tears because we're in a mess and we need to get out of it, right? And my ideal citizen would be saying, what can I do to help? Rather than pinning blame on the other party for everything that's wrong, okay? Whether they're responsible for it or not, or for people like me, saying that, well, I don't have to change and I don't have to make any sacrifices. It's really not my problem. I mean, I elected you to solve this problem here, and you should solve it, right? And make sure that my taxes don't go up and you don't inconvenience me in any way.
Right, but I think we got away from my original question.
We had any questions?
Good. I'll sit down. Thank you very much.
Well, now it's your turn to talk, so who wants to be first? It has to be first. Someone want to be first? Nobody wants to be first? Okay, come on up here.
Me again? This is so boring. Me again. Well, I wrote kind of big this time, so it might not be that disjointed. Okay. Well, George Orwell. I just read 1984 again. So I was wondering, what are your favorite parts? Those phrases that he has, the slogans for 1984. There were three: "War is peace," "Ignorance is strength," and "Freedom is slavery." Which one's your favorite here? 2 and 2 is 5. That's a good one too. See, he likes 2 and 2 is 5. Well, we got the freedom of slavery thing coming up recently with the Veterans Day. You pledge allegiance to the military, which is the most undemocratic thing in the world, I think. It's kind of like slavery, except you get to kill people while you're at it. And we're supposed to worship that. Okay. Ignorance is strength. I'm getting some of that. Everywhere I go, people tell me, don't say that, because it might make your position weaker. And doublethink, I guess that's when a word has two meanings. That's the Orwellian terms. Like, I think I like free speech zone. That's my favorite doublethink one. Free speech zone. Okay. Oh, well, really, what can we do? That's the important question. You're right. I don't know, except that we can keep learning. I keep on bringing up stuff over and over again, and I think nobody's really interested in it, and maybe they think I'm crazy, but I think it's important because it's really outside this box. I think within the box that we've been given, you can't beat Jim Love's presentations, but there is other information available now. I don't know how long it's going to be available with the internet, freedom, which is under threat. But I think you really need to look at 911 to get the formulas to work out right. Instead of like, I don't know. Well, as dumb as I am, and as recently as I started to even care about this stuff, a lot of these formulas make more sense to me now that I've looked into these things. And I don't know how long we'll be able to do that. So there's the 911, then the thing to CAFR, Comprehensive Annual Financial Report I keep bringing up. Everybody finds an excuse not to look into that. Anyway, I just think we have to do something, but right now we do have to learn, and I recommend you look at something that maybe just doesn't fit in with the propaganda you or your party's trying to push. Not necessarily the opposite, Ted Cruz. There's a lot of other stuff out there. So what do we do to determine which things we count for important? Things we can make into a nice talk that fit into everything else we know, or things that really seem to have some undeniable documentation, especially if they're controversial. Those are the places. That's the Achilles heel. I agree. The Supreme Court is a joke. I think this whole thing. Sadly, I think this whole paradigm of government, left, right, communist, Republican, Democrat, is going to just be pretty irrelevant. I think the technology and the way that people are wielding power is trumping that. We're going to come up with something new. The question is, are we going to have a horrible war, depression first? So we're trying to stall that, but we have to be very ruthless with ourselves about what we reject as far as what we're taking in. I recommend looking at 911 again.
Okay, who's next? We have to have a next. Is there a next? Albert, are you going to come up here and say something? All right, come contemplate up here. I can't believe this. You did such a great job, nobody has any comments.
Well, thank you. I thought that was a very good presentation. Again, I'm going to try to use this little example that I know a lot of people don't like, but the public, whether we're liberal or conservative or Democrat or Republican or whatever, we are the roosters in the cockfight. We are all so brainwashed into believing these politicians on either side that we don't realize that they're, like you said, Jim, they're all paid off. And if they're not paid off, they're killed off. Don't get yourself Wellstoned was a little slogan that went around up in Washington, D.C. after Paul Wellstone, a very respected senator, was standing up saying right after 9/11, let's not rush to judgment here. Let's look at all the facts before we go to war. And his airplane crashed. We are very controlled, and I think that, Jim, you have pointed out, without using the word, that we are controlled by very well-planned conspiracies. And it's not being a conspiracy theorist, it's being a conspiracy realist. The people who are satiated with greed and lust for power, which control everything in this world virtually, are not about to give it up, and they will sacrifice any numbers of people in order to accomplish it. They make a lot of money out of war. A friend of mine had a good friend who was in Army intelligence in the early 60s, and he saw enough information come across his desk that he knew we were going to be in a war in Southeast Asia, and that it was planned that, not estimated that, but planned that 50,000 Americans would die in that war. There is a vested interest in continuous killing of human beings in this world by I think, a very sick group of people. And I'm going to recommend everyone here look into some of the presentations by Mark Passio, who got well into the Church of Satan until he realized that it was in violation of the fundamental laws of the universe, of how to treat people, that he could not go any farther. So he spends his life now lecturing on this subject, how pervasive it is and how much broader it is than just a religious thing that we would think of. Most of us are Christians and we'd think, oh, Satanists, that's, crazy. It is crazy. But what they see is that everyone who is not aware is not really a living human being. They're the walking dead. And they are of no more value than animated clay, so they have no remorse in killing any number of them. And even those who are aware but are doing nothing about it are also included in the walking dead. And so there's no remorse, and hence these people turn into sociopaths, psychopaths. And Mark Passio in his lecture, he got well into that craziness until he got out of it. And he said that the actual physiological sickness is just a small percentage of the population, but the ones who evolve into that state of mind is very large and controls most of politics in the world. And so we need to become aware of these things. I would again suggest looking up Yuri Bezmenov and watching his interview. Read The Creature from Jekyll Island, learn about the banking system. That is how we are controlled so terribly in this world. Our founding fathers were totally against anything similar to the Federal Reserve System, a private bank controlling our money. There are a lot of areas that we need to look into, and we need to see more and more and more and more that on this earth we are, even though we're divided into all these factions, we are one people, and we need to see that over all of the artificial divisions which keep us constantly at war with each other. This is all done by planning. It's the roosters in the cockfight, and we're all the victims of it. In the meantime, at the levels above where we're fighting for our lives, they're up there betting money on it and laughing and having a great time. And another guy's out there heating up the barbecue to roast us when the cockfight is over. And that's about how valuable humanity is to these people. And I think we need to realize this and realize that we are all in the same boat. And we need to, please turn that off. We need to see that, and we need to join together as one people on this earth, regardless of any of our religious differences or language differences or cultural differences or national differences. We need to do that, and we need to do it as soon as possible. We don't have a lot of time left.
Go ahead.
Well, thanks, Jim, for coming and talking to us. You bring up subjects that are generally of always of some good interest to us. And some we know little bits about and some we know a lot about. I'm going to say some things about a couple of items. One is the immigration issue. First of all, Texas and no other state can pass any law that has to do with immigration. It's withheld strictly for the federal government. And the frustration the border states have is that during the Reagan administration with the Democratic Congress, we granted amnesty to a number of million immigrants who were here illegally. And then they brought their families and it became a much bigger number. And because that happened, it created a lot of hope and confidence on part of people in other countries that if they came here, perhaps that would get done again and they would be legal. So we have had a non-ending issue with immigration. And Texas and Arizona and New Mexico and California are not authorized to go down and seal the border. Can't do it. With regard to an executive order from the president, I think he's a not wise person to do what he's talking about doing if he does it before the end of the year. This is why. Right now we have a split political party in Congress. The Democrats control the Senate at this point. The Republicans control the House. To think they are going to pass a bill now before year end for the president to meet his approval and him to sign is sort of la-la land. It's not going to happen. It hasn't happened to this point, probably not going to happen. The first 2 years of Obama's administration, he had a Democratic House, he had a Democratic Senate, he didn't do anything about that issue. So for him to stand up in front of the microphone and say, fix it, figuratively, fix it tomorrow or I'm going to do it by executive order, is not a very politically wise thing to do in my viewpoint. If I were him, and I'm not, I would wait till the Republicans get into the Senate, give them some time to work on it, and then if they fail doing it, he can start putting some pressure on. But he needs to wait for that to happen. Otherwise, what he's doing has a pretty bad effect on the likelihood of cooperation with a Republican-controlled Congress. It's going to create anger. I'm going to say a couple of words about wealth gap. We read about a lot of it. I read a lot about it, excuse me. And Republicans don't talk about it, do they? Democrats talk about it. They use it as a tool to generate votes. And I forgot what the exact ratio is. They'll tell you that the ratio of the top 10% to the bottom 20% is now up to, 600 to 1 or something. I've heard the head of the AFL-CIO quote that over and over and over and over and over and over again. It's untrue. It's a lie. It's wrong. It's incorrect. Wrong. W-O-R-N-G. The ratio is about 4 to 1. When you add all of the payments that people in the bottom strata get from the federal government to the paycheck they get, guess what happens? Their income goes up. When you subtract the almost 50% of the U.S. federal tax bill that the top 10% pays, guess what? Their income goes down. The ratio becomes about 4 to 1. That is less than the gap between the lowest and the highest basketball player or football player or anybody else. We're wasting our time getting all bent out of shape about that subject because it's real. It exists in every civilized, industrialized country in the world. You go to Europe, you look at every one of them, same thing. So when we hear the news, people tailor the news to make their point. And if we don't bother to go and look one layer below the surface, which is not difficult to do with the internet we have on all of our computers today, you will not know the truth. Just this week, memo comes to me from the whatever government agency, and it has those numbers in it I just quoted. So they're familiar to me because I just read them in the last 2 or 3 days. So the point is, the rich are better off. They're not making it from salaries, they're making it from investments. They have money to invest. The stock market has been pushed up by the government policy on keeping interest rates down. That's shoved the stock market up. So people who had money at the beginning of that cycle have made a lot of money. People who had no money at the beginning of that cycle, middle class people in many cases, lower middle class, they've made no money during that period of time. But the salary gap between the highest paid individuals and the lowest paid individuals is not anywhere near as wide as what the press tells us. So I'm just telling you, stop and look a little bit. Don't just take it as it's said, because sometimes it's true, sometimes it's untrue. And that one is untrue.
Okay, who's next? Come on up here. Ray is next.
Well, one of the first words that came out of Jim's mouth tonight was having to do with concentrating power. Remember, as I said in my talk, that the whole idea of our Constitution and our country's way of government is that power will not be concentrated. The Congress makes the laws, and that's all they can do. The President enforces the law, and that's all he can do. The Supreme Court rules on the constitutionality of those laws. Those three cannot do the other's job. But we have had presidential executive orders all along. But those executive orders cannot violate our Constitution. They cannot circumvent Congress. They cannot change the law that was made by Congress. The president does not have that legitimate constitutional power. Another thing that Jim said, that we've got a problem with lies. I don't know if you've heard about some of the biggest lies this week. They have been blockbuster. If you haven't heard, you will soon. An MIT professor, Jonathan Gruber, he was one of the architects, a primary architect of Obamacare. They have found a video of him making a speech. It was even a year ago. And he has called the voters stupid, the stupidity of the voters. He said that in designing Obamacare that they had to torture the language. It was twisted. And he said if we did not deceive the voters, Obamacare would not have gone through. They had to fool the people, deceive the people, otherwise they would not have received it. This is what he said. Jonathan Gruber, MIT professor of economics, tenured professor, brilliant, and he says the people have to be deceived. If you have not seen that one, you need to check that one out. Jim said that Obama was blocked in one place. I thought, Obama is blocked? Guess who blocked most of the legislation? That would have been Senator Harry Reid. The Republicans have had something in the nature, I've read, of 300 bills during these 6 years, and Reid has blocked the majority of them. And when I say block them, he will not allow the Senate to even vote. And if you know, and you've heard it before, there's 30 some odd bills that the Republicans have brought to defeat Obamacare. 30 some of them. And when they were brought by the House, they knew it wasn't going to go anywhere because Harry Reid would not touch it. He would not even allow the vote to go on him. Now, one of the main things with this particular election, in my opinion, the whole idea that the Republicans did get the Senate this time and was a fantastic victory for Republicans. In the purpose of it, the people were simply saying, stop this administration, stop Obama, stop the decline. Republicans have a mandate. The mandate is to stop what is going on. That is the idea. Never mind reaching across the stinking aisle. If these Republicans keep talking about that, our heads are going to explode. Stop Obama was the message of this last election. Thank you.
Yes.
These midterm elections have really brought forth one thing, and one thing I think decisively, is we now have a common enemy, the Republican establishment. That's what we're going to be facing very soon. And I think it's very interesting how the news spun that this election was a repudiation of the Tea Party and the independents and the libertarians, when I think that it didn't prove anything of the sort. But that's the spin we're getting from the media. So as far as immigration and solving immigration issues, I can sneak into Mexico. I will do time in Mexico. I won't even eat unless some family member or some kind person pays for my meals there. And it's probably going to cost thousands of dollars to get me back. Now that's Mexico's policy. How about a little equity here? You know, if we're just going to relax our borders, it's not working both ways, folks. And all this business about shutting down coal power plants, China's not following the same rules. Every month, China, basically I think it's around 10 dirty, burning coal power plants go online in China every week. And yet, Obama has been taking some of our clean burning coal plants and shutting them down. And we're going into a severe winter here. If we have power outages, if we have rolling brownouts, blackouts, you know who to thank for that. Someone has said this, I'm not the originator of this by any means, but they say that the president is kind of like the paper in the birdcage. The new paper is put in at election time, and then the big birds do their business, and then everyone holds their nose and wants to get rid of that one. I actually advise people on the fence to vote for Obama. After what Bush did when Bush was in office, and the last Republican leadership, I felt we had a moral mandate to register our objection to what was done. So let's really focus in on the 1% here and understand that whatever good intentions Obama may have had, hasn't he played the game of the 1% of the corporate interests? Hasn't he done that? So we don't know what happened. Maybe that back hall discussion went on where someone showed him a little footage of the JFK assassination from a different angle no one has ever seen publicly, and then asked him afterwards, "Do you have any questions?" Now let's get on with business.
Okay, who's next? We got a next? Is that we ran out of people going to talk? You want to get up here again?
I wrote real big, but I didn't read it. Ray, you need to look at the Obama deception. It's one of these other things that I recommend all the time that nobody does. The Obama deception was the most widely viewed internet movie ever when it came out. The reason it's spectacular is because it was released when he was only in office 3 months. It was made largely while he was just beginning to campaign. And that's what's real interesting. briefly, before you get just the name is a bit, repulsive to a lot of people, but it also attracts a lot of people. He doesn't attack Obama personally. It's more like along the lines of what John just said. The actual personality of the president these days doesn't matter too much because the power has shifted into other hands. And it goes into detail about that. The best part of that movie is it shows exactly how the cabinet is the same kind of people. How, what was that guy? Robert Gates was took over the Defense Department, and on and on and on. Glass-Steagall. Anyway, it's a well-made movie, and I think it still stands out for the fact that the guy, he said, I've been watching trends, and I'm going to make this movie. And he invested a lot of money. He's not like a rich guy. It wasn't Hollywood. And it became #1. And it was made while he was on the campaign trail. And another really interesting thing, if you don't want to watch the whole thing, the business where he deletes where the cabinet came from is good. The other thing is he shows on the campaign trail where the Obama campaign loaded up the whole press corps, the main journalists of America, onto an airplane to follow Obama around on the campaign trail. That big circus. And then they took off without Obama, and they hijacked the whole press corps and took him away. So that's the only thing I want to say. Look at the movie. It's easily available online. Obama Deception, whatever side you're on, it goes into depth, into some detail about what John said and what I'm trying to say. Thank you.
Okay, who's next? Oh, no.
One thing that needs separate emphasis here is Iceland repudiated the debt. We haven't repudiated the debt. I've heard people discuss $100 trillion that America and the American taxpayers are now responsible for. That there's no way to manage that. There's simply, it's mathematically impossible. And to some extent, you might say this is by design. Charles Gasparino had another opinion. He thought it was simply by greed. He has a book called Sellout, Charles Gasparino, and the byline says basically how Wall Street destroyed the economy of the world. And someone questioned him on that in a Q&A session after his speech. And he said, well, you may not have seen it yet, but it's on the way. What is he talking about? He's talking about not just the mortgage problems. He's talking about the entire derivatives. Once Glass-Steagall was nixed, then we've had this frenzy of creation of all these derivatives. And worldwide, I understand that the sum total now, because you realize even after all the stink and all the problems of derivatives and all the different QE this and QE that, now they're saying we have about 2 quadrillion in derivatives. Folks, the system's got to come down. And I don't know over the next few months what we're going to see of economic matters, but I would be very surprised if it isn't extremely scary. So I would say we all need to be brave. I've advised before, stock up, make sure you have for yourself and your family, because the shelf may be bare. Someone was questioning someone, kind of a prepper sort, and they were asking him, well, I've heard that, if we have a collapse, that there might only be 3 days of food in the system. He said, try 3 hours. Once a panic starts, the shelves are going to empty. There's going to be no restocking, not with just-in-time management. So this is what could be on the horizon. And I see Jim shrugging over there. Hey, no one hopes this is going to happen. And you know what? We could get the gumption and get the grassroots, work as one group, forget parties, and get this false, fraudulent debt repudiated, just like Iceland did. If you don't know what I'm talking about, study what Iceland did. The bankers were not happy. Some of the bankers in Iceland went to jail. Really, that's what we need to do here. Gasparino's book, Sellout. Thank you.
I would like to make one short comment. I think we need to be careful when we evaluate sources. It's become obvious that John certainly, and it looks like Tom, have joined the Men in Black.
Well, if everybody's going to do a second round, I guess I will too. I mentioned about about Congress and their roles, their duties. Congress to make the laws, the President to enforce the laws, and the Supreme Court to rule on constitutionality. And those were things that I talked about in my talk. You can say, for crying out loud, Ray, this is what is causing such a gridlock. This is why Congress can't move. This is why we can't get anything done. My friends, that is how it is supposed to work. It should be difficult for Congress, for government to put laws on the American people. If there is going to be laws that restrict or govern the American people, there needs to be full consent and approval of Congress. It needs to be enough to pass Congress. And if it is a stalemate, if it is a gridlock, so be it. It must not be right, or we would have more unanimity. All right? And Jim mentioned about the lies. There's been lots of lies. Here's some more lies. With Obamacare, we were told that we would be able to keep our plan. That is not happening. All over this country, people are losing their plan. Everything is up in the air. We were told that we would keep our doctor, and people are losing their doctor. I lost my wonderful doctor, primary care doctor. Never would have thought he would retire. I think I know why, but he just went away. And so those were lies. Do you understand that we were told lies by our government that we could keep the plan or keep the doctor, because doctors are bailing by the thousands? An ordinary family, about 4 people, normal American family, would save money of maybe $2,500 a year. That was the magic number that was told many times. That is a lie. Those were lies that the administration and the president knew was a lie. Here's one you don't care about, but listen to me. Benghazi. Yeah. Give me just... We don't care about 4 dead Americans, but folks, we should care about lies. We were told for 2 or 3 weeks that it was because of a video. It was a video. This nasty anti-Islam video caused everything. It just rippled through. After Benghazi, that weekend, that was Susan Rice told 4 or 5 Sunday morning programs. The president repeated it. That was that nasty video. It was an awful video. It was the video. They had the hearings many months later, the word video was never mentioned. We were told it was the video by this administration countless times, and they knew. They knew it was a lie. We may not care about 4 dead Americans. Benghazi may be off the table for right now. You and I, as Americans, ought to care that our government has lied to us. That never, never goes away.
That's all they do.
We've touched on a lot of different things tonight. But I want to say first and foremost, Jim, you did a great presentation. I enjoyed it very much. I disagree with some comments. I don't agree with all of the comments. Obviously, we have opposing thinking, opposing parties, representatives here tonight, as usual, and that's okay. But the healthcare, Affordable Health Care Act has been a success. It's been a huge success, and that's kind of a big secret among certain circles. But it's been well publicized that the enrollment is up, the jobs were created, people are saving a ton of money, and so it's not the administration's fault if the greedy doctors can't rip off their patients like they did in the past. That was the whole point of the Health Care Act, was to protect the people. Too many people were having their homes foreclosed because they had to pay for a surgery or something. They went in bankruptcy because of the medical bills. That should never happen. And out of 114 countries of the world that have health care for their citizens, the United States wasn't even on that list. And we're supposed to be the leader of a democracy, the leader of this world and our economy. Come on. You know, finally we've got something that everybody else has had for many, many years. Thank goodness. I think our big problem here is I disagree with your numbers on the income inequality ratios. All of the numbers that I've looked at are something like 397% difference between the average high salaries and the average low salaries. 397% difference in their salaries. And that should never happen. When something like that happens, throughout the history of the world, there's going to be a big civil war. There's going to be a big war. Okay? That is what happens if we don't do something about it. So we need to address this. There are some countries in Europe that have set up inequality income ratio structures of like 12 to 1 or 10 to 1. I think that's more than adequate. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. I don't think anyone should get paid more than the president of this country in this country. I think that should be the top salary. He's the top dog. He should get paid the most. The CEOs that are making $30 million or $30 billion a year, that's crazy. That's just insane. And this is where the power is coming from, the power that's buying our elections, that we have to put a stop to. And the sooner the better, because every year that this continues, the inequality gets worse and we get closer to civil war. That is the predictable result of this kind of inequality. It hasn't been seen in this radical difference that we see here today since the French Revolution. Okay? And that's what that was all about. That's what all of the revolutions are usually about. It's about money. And it's about the haves against the have-nots, or the have-nots are fighting to take back what is rightfully theirs, their fair share. Personally, you know, being a woman, I've never gotten paid what I'm worth, right? And I have 4 degrees from another state when I moved to Texas, and guess what? I was still in my 20s and had no idea when you cross state lines your degree doesn't count anymore. You know, I was told I have to go back 4 years to a Texas university and have a degree from Texas to be a nurse, to be a teacher, to be a psychologist. Didn't matter. But I got stuck here because I was married and I kicked him out, and so I got stuck here with the children and I raised them on my own. Went to work for law firms, being a paralegal. You know, we can do that. We could do that in those days. You don't have to have a degree to be a paralegal, you just have to be smart. Okay, but anyway, Citizens United is the worst thing that's happened to this country in the past 200 years, as far as I'm concerned. No one should be allowed to buy elections. You know, and we say that President Obama didn't get it done. Well, yes, that's true. He didn't get a lot of things done. His very first year in office, and I kept track of this, and I have records at my house on my computer, okay, of all of the articles that said, you know, he put in this infrastructure. We're talking about, why doesn't he have a jobs bill? Well, he proposed that the first year he was in office and presented it to Congress and talked about it over and over and over, and it was blocked. It was passed by the Senate but blocked by the House. Immigration, passed by the Senate, blocked by the House. Infrastructure, passed by the Senate, blocked by the House. So now we have both houses of Congress being Republican, so yes, it's a lame duck section. There's not going to be anything done except to get the dadgum Keystone Pipeline, and that would be the first thing on their agenda, and it has already come up for discussion and it's already been approved by both the House and the Republican Senate, and it will go into effect probably in January. First thing on the agenda, take all of that toxic chemicals and run it down through the central Mississippi Valley with all of the clean water aquifers being contaminated all the way to the Gulf Coast from Canada. You know, why don't they take it to California or Washington? Why does it have to come through our heartland and destroy our soil and our water and our air? But I don't know what I can do about that. I can continue to protest, which I will. So there's only 2 people that I know of that are possible Democratic candidates for president, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, that are not bought out by the 1%ers that are running the world. And God help us if something happens to Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders, then I'll believe all the conspiracy theories that I've been hearing. No, anyway, yes, 90% of our seats are going to be gerrymandered for the unpredictable future. That's depressing. That is very depressing. But I'm hopeful. Yes?
But 397%, I'm sure that's what you wanted to say?
I can give you the evidence. Right. No. 397 to 1. Okay, that's not 4 to 1. That's not divided by 4. And that's with the tax loopholes, and that's with all of these other variables that change the numbers around. You have no idea how many people are making over $1 billion a year. dozens, 32 people, actually 32.
Any more speakers? Susie, you gonna come up here and talk?
I'll be quick. And I'm not going to repeat myself. Jim, thank you again for preparing your talk. I want to remind everybody how he started out. The New Deal has been dismantled on purpose by people who do not want you and you and you and you and you and you and me and all of you guys do not want you to be successful. They would like to keep the power for themselves. You can go ahead and call me a conspiracy theorist if you like. I agree with the fact about stagnant wages for the last 10 years, despite increasing productivity. For many of you who've been retired 10 years or longer, you don't know what it's like in corporate America anymore. You just don't. You don't. It's kind of like me being born in the middle of the 1960s, thinking that I understand what it was like for the people who were protesting for the right to vote or for the right to have interracial marriages, whatever they were protesting for equality. I don't know what that's like because that battle's already been fought and won in my lifetime, thanks to a lot of people who got the crap beat out of them. Right? I don't know what it's like to be in that kind of a battle for sanity, for equality. And I honor the people who have done that. I do know what it's like to be involved in rehashing the old, we don't want government in our lives. Right? We don't want government telling us what to do, unless of course you're a woman, and unless of course you could potentially become pregnant, and then forget it, because your DNR, your Do Not Resuscitate order, does not apply in Texas if you are pregnant when you are needing life support and about to be found legally dead. Your rights do not apply. Nobody gets that. Okay? So I'm going to go back to Franklin D. Roosevelt and one of his famous quotes that I found while we were kind of listening to some repeat offenders here tonight. We had to struggle with the old enemies of peace, business and financial monopoly, speculation, reckless banking, class antagonism, sectionalism, war profiteering. They had begun to consider the government of the United States as a mere appendage to their own affairs. We now know that government by organized money is just as dangerous as government by organized mob. Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And I think that that's what we're losing sight of in all this back and forth. Did the Democrats do this? Did Obamacare do that? And yes, I agree with you. I think Obamacare was a success in that people can no longer be denied insurance over pre-existing conditions when they change from one job to another because their employer lays them off. Okay? People can get affordable care. 100% of your exam for, just your annual exam for determining if you have anything that you can prevent, 100% of that has to be paid by your insurer. Okay? Why is it that there's a giant group of Texas, a panel in Texas that says now suddenly Texas shouldn't be rejecting the federal money that we are turning away despite the fact that we're bringing it in? We're paying these taxes. Every single one of us is paying these taxes, but we're giving that money to other states because of some political bullshit points, pardon my language, that somebody's trying to make, and now suddenly the panel, completely assembled by our soon-to-be ex-governor Rick Perry, is recommending that Texas expand Medicaid here. Okay? Oops. Oops. Now, as far as somebody saying that you get to keep your doctor, look, I'm sorry, I'd like to keep my teacher. Okay? Teachers got laid off. Teachers decided to retire. Why? Funding. Your doctor decided to retire maybe because he put in enough time and he or she was ready to retire. I don't think that you can blame that on the fact that now they can't deny pre-existing conditions. I'm kind of cynical right now. I realize that. I realize I've probably talked for more than 5 minutes, and so I'm ready for Jim to have the last word.
Any more speakers? We finally. Oh, you want to be a speaker? Sure. Come on up here.
This is 2 weeks in a row. I hope I don't make a habit of this. But I would like to confirm that people are losing their insurance policies. It's not, the deal is they are not matching the Affordable Care Act. And the Affordable Care Act says if you are not as good as the Affordable Care Act, you have to increase it or improve it. So rather than increasing or improving your policy that you are carrying, they say, oh, you can't have that. You got to buy some insurance someplace else. And they blame it on, I can't keep it. Well, the reason you can't keep it is because it's too wrong. I had, unfortunately, a situation where I had to give a 3-minute speech because the speaker that was supposed to be there didn't show up on group health insurance. And they're divided. They literally kicked out half of their people out of group insurance. And they complain, we don't know why the insurance is going up. The point is, the larger the people's group in any insurance company, any group, it's insurance 101. And I was looking at this august body that may have a few years on me, may not. I would hope they had the same education I got. You kick out half the people in your group insurance policy, the policy is going to go up. And I told them they may have a fiduciary problem. That means if someone voted on it, moved on it, and enriched themselves on that decision to kick out half the people, you got a problem. And I evidently hit a nerve because when I was packing up my stuff, I was surrounded by 3 or 4 of the board members. And it's on the internet, and they're saying they have a bigger problem than trying to keep all the people in group out, because their insurance policy as it stands is not as good as Affordable Care Act. It's a good policy, but it's not as good as Affordable Care Act, and they are fortunately that the provision that will start fining them for not increasing it or bringing it along is going to bankrupt them. So they're going to either have to say, okay, we'll either keep the policy as it is, take the fines, or we're going to have to do away with our insurance policy, which means more people are going to the Affordable Care Act. So that's all I have to say. And I told them they need to reassess what they're doing, because they're making all the wrong decisions for all the wrong reasons. Thank you.
Well, we're running out of time, just so you know. I guess I'm the last one standing. I want to thank our speaker. I think he did a great job tonight. Got us all thinking, and the fact that we're up here talking so much is all based on what you had to say. Healthcare has been blasted as sinking the budget, yet there's nothing more than it's really nothing more than Monday morning quarterbacking. A lot of jobs were created because of the Affordable Care Act, which was needed, especially if you look at the rest of the industrial world, which has health care that we did not have. The next problem that's creating jobs is to recognize that we have 25 million people out of full-time work due to automation and corporations leaving the country to go where labor costs are cheaper. We need to put tariffs on corporations, not countries, to pay the difference in labor and environmental costs in order to get to sell their goods here. That has to happen. But in order to get Congress to do that, we have to get Congress to act to provide free airtime. The last 90 days of a general election, which have Congress represent the electorate instead of those entities that buy their vote in Washington, D.C. Members of Congress will be able to keep the money they have plus obtain free airtime. They'll vote for it. Then we could act to shorten the workday to 6 hours without cutting the daily pay and raising the cost of overtime to double time to outweigh the cost of fringe benefits. 25 million people could be reemployed full-time, and we'd have our taxpayers instead of tax drainers. Then we wouldn't have to worry about the dollar losing its place on the world currency, which is we're facing today. That was brought up. If we want a retirement system to function positively in the long run, then we need a stronger base to strengthen our economy. This should be obvious. So that's what I would say about all of that. Anyway, our speaker is, you get the last word, Jim.
I can't talk about everything because we'd be here till midnight. Hank, 2 and 2 equals 5 because Big Brother says so. That's doublethink. Both parties having their own set of facts, that's Big Brother. I mean, it doesn't matter what the facts really are. Who said it? You know, if your party leader said it, it must be true, right? Big Brother. Albert, well-planned conspiracy. Well, yeah, hell yes. I mean, we got Rush Limbaugh, we got MSNBC, we've got gerrymandered districts, and we got all the money that you could possibly imagine in politics, and we got any number of people who have swallowed all the lies and drank all the Kool-Aid. So there you go. Jim, I understand what you're saying, that, oh, gee, you don't want to do it for the end of the year and give the Republicans a chance to cooperate. But what makes you think after 6 years of non-cooperation they're now ready to cooperate? I don't think so. I'm being cynical, I know. They ain't going to cooperate. They'll find something and they'll attach it to something, okay? And nothing will get done. So the timing is immaterial as far as I'm concerned. Now, the income and wealth gap, I'm not going to argue with you on your numbers, but I don't think you'll argue with me that there is an income and a wealth gap. There is no argument about that. Nobody on the right or the left argues that. Now, the issue is what's being done with the wealth. I have nothing against Bill Gates making all the money in the world. I don't want to see one damn nickel of it in politics. And that's the problem. So, and the Supreme Court is part of the problem. And by the way, most of the statistics that are around will tell you that we are now, the whole world, the globe, is moving into a wealth-based economy. The wealth levels right now everywhere, because it is a global economy, are at unprecedented levels. We haven't seen this since before World War I. It's a bad thing. It's a bad thing. All of this money being concentrated in too few hands, and I don't know about you, but I do know that the middle class has been screwed for the last 20 years. Increasing productivity, and you know, the jobs are shipped overseas. Unions are powerless to stop it. They're computerized out of existence. There's no plan. There's no phasing in. There's no industrial plan. He says, well, it's your fault. Now, the reason all of this is happening is because investors have figured out they can make a lot more money this way. And the country be damned. The middle class be damned. They don't care. Okay. Ray, your points on purpose of government. Adhere to the Constitution. Well, yeah. Who gets to interpret it, right? That's the problem. I mean, if you interpret it as I do, where you promote the general welfare, then that leaves the field wide open for what Congress can and cannot do. But these narrow readings that are provided, okay, by these esteemed majority of 5 on the court, the strict constructionists, okay, the originalists, okay, let me tell you my interpretation. My interpretation, and I don't shy from this word, the purpose of government in promoting the general welfare is to do 2 things. To redistribute wealth for reasons that I just made clear. Too much money in too few hands perverts democracy. I do not shy away from saying that wealth distribution is a requirement to have a functioning democracy. That's number 1. Number 2, balancing of power. Roosevelt balanced power by empowering unions. The right-wing interests in this country have spent they've spent my adult lifetime, okay, in making sure, okay, that there is no power in the hands of working people, or as little as possible. Well, are you telling me, Ray, that unions, okay, are all powerful? If they were, not one single job would have ever been shipped to China, and you know it. Well, you can make that argument. You can make the argument that the unions price themselves out of competition, but you can also make the argument that American corporations were more than happy since sweatshops were not allowed on American soil. They were more than happy to send them to Asian sweatshops, which is exactly what they did. So there's that. Now, as far as big lies are concerned, you talked about the MIT professor, you talked about the lies that have to do about the Affordable Care Act. Well, let me remind everyone here that politicians lie routinely on both sides. Anybody argue with that? I mean, it comes with the territory, okay? Now, here's a big lie for you. How about the Iraq War will pay for itself? How's that for a big lie? That's what Mr. Wolfowitz said in sworn testimony to Congress. I mean, the oil revenues will be so much once we move in there, we'll be graded as liberators, right? And then it won't cost the American taxpayer a dime. How about LBJ saying Asian boys should fight Asian wars? I've been bipartisan here. I just quoted a Democratic liar, and I just quoted a Republican liar. I think I've made my point. All right, and let's see. Harry Reid blocking legislation. Well, yeah. 51 times they vote to repeal Obamacare, right? And the House sends it to them, okay? And they refuse to vote on it because, and you excuse me for saying so, I think a lot of the bills they sent them were frivolous. Why waste the taxpayers' time and money? That's number 1. Number 2, what about all the Republican filibusters in the Senate, which were at a record level? So, yeah, and shutting down the government as well. There's plenty of blame to go around for obstructionism on both sides. But I don't think that Republicans can run away from their obstruction. They were obstructionists, and they've been calculatingly so, okay, for political reasons, not for the good of this country. Okay, and who am I leaving out here? Susie, I guess I'm going to close with you. Roosevelt also described the government that was, they asked him one time what fascism was. And what he said was where private sector interests own the apparatus of government. Yeah. And that is what we have now. That's what we have now. We have, you know, and that is and I'm going to close with not only Roosevelt, but with another big lie. The big lie, okay, is that in spite of all of the facts that I've laid out for you, the dismantling of the New Deal, right? is that this government and Obama has been pressing to move us, okay, towards socialism. Okay, in spite of all of the facts to the contrary, when you, I think, level-headedly consider them, is that we're moving towards an oligarchical fascism, okay, where every means of government is owned by private interests. And that's bad. Not only is it bad, what makes it worse, they're not accountable. You don't know where the money's coming from. And they're in a position to make ungodly amounts of money, okay, because they own the government and there's no restrictions. So, to argue that we have a functional democracy, I think, is a mistake. We don't. And we are in decline. We've been steadily moving towards fascist control of our government, okay? And as I said about Obama, no good deed will go unpunished, particularly when you realize that what the real movers and shakers, the prime movers, fear most is a revival of the New Deal. The last thing that they want, okay, is for the American people to take back control of the government. They like it the way it is. They're going to keep it the way it is, and they're going to put a death grip on it. And the only thing that can change that is that history teaches us is that if this goes on for too long and to too large of an extent, it has a way of resolving itself, but it's not pretty. Anyways, that's all I got. Thanks.
Okay, that's it for tonight, but our speaker and his wife are welcome down to Starbucks down at the corner. We'll carry on the conversation there if you like, and thank you very much. That's it for tonight.
This is William, your videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below, or like us, or follow us, and get notices of all our videos. We love it even when you call. So when visiting the Barbeck's restaurant, tell them you want your reservation to the next College of Complex class.